We're extremely sorry for the delay. With due respect, we now call upon stage Mr. Shantanu Moitra, Hidayat Khan, and Miss Namita Devidayal.
Hello, check. Hello.
Hello.
Let's start. Um, Good evening. Beautiful setting and a very difficult subject. Uh, I'm personally, it's a cliche. Um, when I was hearing sitar and I did not know who was playing it, 9 out of 10 times in my house, it would be Ustad Vilayat Khan. Um, so much I didn't know about Vilayat Khan till I read this book, and so much I didn't care because what was important for me was what I heard. But I could make out at a very young age that the person who's playing this instrument is a rock star, somebody who didn't care form, size, um, Riaz. Something is doing on stage, something is doing in the performance, which doesn't fit in. In my very naive brain, I could understand that. And it's amazing that when I read Namita's book, The Sixth String of Vilayat Khan, some of the dots joined as to why he was and what he was. And I think during the course of the evening, just chatting with Namita, some of these dots I hope will be joined for you also. Who is this enigma? Who is this rock star? And why was he who was he? So I want to ask you, Namita, a very cliched question. I'm sorry. Why did you choose to write about Vilayat Khan?
So I have a slightly uninspired answer, but it's the truth. Um, Hidayat, his son, who's a friend of mine and who you'll meet this evening, uh, just kept saying that, Namita, you need to write this book. Everyone needs to know who the real Vilayat Khan was. And I kept saying, bhai, nahi, like I don't really understand sitar music. And, um, and then I think I was just at a sort of low phase in my life and I needed something to do. And so I said, theek hai. So that's the reason I said yes. And then I started researching a little bit into his life just by talking to people who were close to him And within a few weeks, I was completely smitten, because here's a man who, apart from being this amazing musician, was a fabulous ballroom dancer. He stitched his own clothes. He used to be able to take out the engine of a Mercedes Benz and put it right back together and be able to tell from the purring of the engine what the state of the car was, as if it was his instrument. So I was just like, oh my God, this man is just too fabulous for me to not be in his world. And sure enough, I spent about 4 years just doing detective work into his life and feeling utterly privileged about it, because it was like entering the life of a genius.
Um, and you mentioned the car, tinkering with the car part of it. It's amazing. Ustadji's mother, Namita, astounding role she has played in Vilayat Khan's life. She was such a visionary. At a young age, she loses her husband, Vilayat's father, and that clarity, and almost not just clarity, in control, that who will teach my son, what will he learn, what will he not learn, and so much so that when we all know that Ustadji loved singing, she was so clear that aap gana nahi gayenge. What was when you were researching? What was that coming out?
So she is what I would call in our language today the original tiger mom, before Amy Chua even invented the term. Uh, so as you know, as some of you might know, in musical families, um, music is treated as an asset, as the sort of property. Uh, People would be willing to part with physical assets, but not with compositions and not with hereditary compositions. So I think that, so she came from a musical family as well, but it was a family of singers. So she was completely steeped in this tradition. When she lost her husband, I was told that she very clearly decided to apportion the family assets. Her elder son would learn the sitar, and her younger son would learn the surbahar. And that was essentially the entire family legacy that she was dividing between these two boys. And then she spent, I think, the next so many years just ensuring that they got the best talim from whoever was in a position to give it, to the extent that I heard that she I told you this, that she would, there was a relative of theirs who was quite a substance abuser and an addict. But in his younger years, he had got the best talim from, the elders in the family. So she would actually feed his habit. She would invite him home and ensure that she gave him whatever he needed to be happy, and as long as he taught. So, she went to like real lengths, and I got this from, Imrat Khan Sahib before he passed away, um, among others. And it's quite formidable, really, because, and it could have been a multiple of reasons that she did this, other than just a kind of a selfless desire to create this legacy and keep it alive. I think she also recognized that these were the potential breadwinners in her family, and she saw in them, her own sort of sustenance and future. So I think that that's the way it worked, and it's very interesting, because it seems to me that in the lives of many of these great artists, there are all these sort of like hidden figures, who, some not so hidden, but really who are really important in making them who they are. And they often remain the footnotes, because they don't get recognized as the guru or the. But she really was that, because she made sure that the boys went to her parents' family and learnt, and her brother was essentially played a very big role in making sure that Vilayat Khan just did his practice with rigor. So even if he didn't actually teach him the compositions, he was there sitting and lovingly and, somewhat strictly, but in that loving way, just making sure that he practiced. So these are all very important things that go into the making of a musician.
Absolutely. And Namita, I think as a composer, I can tell you, um, Ustadji's was for me, was a designer. Okay. Now, what happens for a designer is that he's not just playing sitar. He's designing that instrument to suit his thought. Now, in a situation where he loves singing and he wants to use that gaiki on the sitar, which the way it's built at the moment, he he can't, he has that guts, that's courage to change and tweak that instrument almost the way he did the car. And he's doing that to a Mercedes Benz, which is one of the great cars in the world. But it could be the greatest car in the world, but it doesn't suit me. I need to do some things to it to suit my taste. I think in your book, that comes out so amazingly about Vilayat Khan Sahab. You have a beautiful passage on Bhairavi. And why I want you to read that out, Namita, is because I keep on telling you this and others that Ustadji's one of the most favorite idioms was space between the notes. And I think you have used very little words to describe something as complex as music. But this Bhairavi part is a beautiful piece. Just read out a bit to all of us.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying about this space between the notes, I think that sometimes we forget that the way in which artists live their lives are very much a reflection of how they play their music. And Khan Sahab would, retreat so often into quiet spaces in his life. I think he really valued that quietness, and just when he was at the peak of his career, for example, he left Bombay and went off to Shimla, to a place which was, I don't know how many miles away from the nearest concert venue. And that's what he wanted to do. And so anyway, I will read this piece out, but
Should I hold your mic?
So, just to give some context, I write this passage right after I describe some of Khan Sahib's dalliances with his women friends. The thing is, the enduring female presence in Vilayat Khan's life was not a human being, but a rag, Bhairavi. Everything else fell somewhere between respite and pleasure. It would be a momentary act, perhaps filled with passion, but with a finite quality to it. He couldn't do without women, of course. He played them with the same joy with which he strummed his instrument, but they could never replace his true love. Bhairavi was the one rag he played with heightened ecstasy, and perhaps the rag he played the most times in his life. Vilayat Khan was raised a Muslim and was rarely without his prayer beads. But his devotion to the goddess Parvati, embodied in Rag Bhairavi, was purer and more intense than any Hindu priest could have mustered. In his mind, the mythology of Bhairavi and the melodic manifestations of Bhairavi merged into one. Bhairavi was the counterpoint to Bhairav, the rag embodying Shiv. He once said in an interview, "I wish I could describe my vision of Bhairav's infinite form and awesome power. I would say the same for Bhairavi. How many different facets of her persona I have envisioned. O Allah, by how many different names and in how many different forms you manifest yourself to the seeker. It is we who give you different names according to our limited capacity to understand you. All of them are names in praise of your glory. You are masculine. You are also feminine. You are the lover. You are also the beloved. You are the ascetic. You are also the emperor." Like so many Muslim musicians, Vilayat Khan's family was originally Hindu. Most of these artists had converted because their patronage came from the Mughal royalty that ruled over most of India. In this family, fittingly, the reason had been romance. Many years ago, his forefather, a handsome Rajput landowner, fell in love with a woman who was part of a caravan that had traveled to India from Central Asia. He converted to Islam to be with her, and that was how the new lineage began. Romance flowed through this family like an underground spring, spurting in the strangest places, sometimes unexpectedly, always in the mode of music.
Beautiful. This is beautiful. Beautiful. Now
Should I play a little Bhairavi? It's on my phone,
Yeah,
so
please
it'll
do
be a
that.
little
It'll be nice.
weird.
Yeah.
But why not if we're in...
Give me your...
Let me try this. Okay, we're going to try. It's just one of my most beautiful pieces by him.
Magic. Magic. Even on a mobile phone.
I'll just tell you a little bit about where this recording comes from.
Sure.
Because it's been one of the very special parts of the, researching this book. There's this man called Lyle Wachowski who lives in New York, who became obsessed with Vilayat Khan. And he literally paid for him to be in America for 6 months with his family, just so that he could record him in the best studios of New York. And he has some of the most extraordinary recordings of Vilayat Khan Sahib, which he shared very generously with me while I was working on this book. And it's really something, because I think this music clearly just transcends space and geography. And it's interesting because he was such a purist, this man who had no background in music whatsoever. And another very interesting little anecdote about him is that, so he had no background in Indian classical music, other than the fact that when he was in college many, many years ago in the 60s, he attended a course by Ravi Shankar Saab, Pandit Ravi Shankar, just kind of like opening the world of Indian classical music to an uninitiated American audience, which was at that time very eager for something new. And so it's amazing that that little nugget was planted, and some 30 years later, he went around, searching for it, and he found Vilayat Khan Sahib. And, at that point, I don't think he could afford Ravi Shankar, but also he was looking for pure sort of what he considered, the real thing. So when he recorded this particular Bhairavi, I believe he was like, Abba, he used to call him Abba. He said, Abba, I don't want any of the singing and anything. I want the real thing. And that's what he got here. So
Beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful. You mentioned Ravi Shankar. In your book, Ravi Shankar keeps on coming. Almost like I told you, almost like when I saw Mozart, Amadeus for the first time, the way Mozart's father used to keep on coming in his dream when he was creating Don Giovanni. Somebody he looked up to but was fearful of. There's a very interesting incident in your book where, a small incident, where he had done this piece of work in Europe somewhere, and the CD was printed and it came to him. And when the package was opened, there, by mistake, the publisher had written sitar played by Pandit Ravi Shankar. That day he was very sad. I just want to know, Namita, when you were researching this book and you were researching this maestro, we've heard so much. What was happening in his mind about Pandit Ravi Shankar?
So, I just want to sort of preface this by saying that who am I to really comment on this, because I wasn't in his mind and I have no idea, but I've just tried to come as close to that by talking to as many people who were close to him, and also just gauging and listening to so many of his interviews and reading so many of his interviews, and also listening to some of the recordings of his concerts where he would often, without naming anyone, refer to certain musicians who were being given applause and accolades when they really didn't deserve it, etc. So he would do that on and off. And, there were these moments where, and, I heard that he would always ask the concert organizers in America how much Pandit Ravi Shankar was being paid, and then ask for just like $10 more. So there were sort of things like that, he would. So having said that, I think that he did care about the fact that Pandit Ravi Shankar was kind of world famous and, really had an incredible reach. But I don't think he cared enough, because he had a lot of opportunity to be the collaborative lateral artist that Ravi Shankar was. There's a story about how Isaac Stern had once approached him and said that, why don't we do something together? And I believe he said to him that your music is so immense and our music is so immense. Let's just leave it at that and allow them both to just go deeper rather than attempt to collaborate. And so I think that was just an approach. It wasn't like one was better or worse. They just had very different approaches to music. I think at the risk of simplifying, Ravi Shankar went much more horizontal with his collaborations, and Vilayat Khan chose to go deeper and deeper, in a vertical sense. And I, however, did choose this one story to write about to open this book. The chapter is called "Who is this Vilayat Khan?" Because a lot of non-musical people perhaps cannot quite place him in the context of Ravi Shankar. Who was this Vilayat Khan? So I might read this out because it's an amazing story about which took place in 1952 at a concert in New Delhi. At a time when all these people were in their 20s and early 30s. 1952, Delhi. It had been 5 years since independence, and India was still in the mood for celebration. Two young string musicians were performing together at the Constitution Club grounds. A sitar player called Ravi Shankar and a sarod player whose name was Ali Akbar Khan. Both were in their early 30s and students of Baba Alauddin Khan, an ambidextrous musician with a goatee, famous for his genius and his temper. Accompanying them that evening were two tabla masters from Banaras, Kanthe Maharaj and his nephew Kishan. A covered stage had been constructed on the grounds. The musicians walked up, one behind the other, all wearing white. While they were tuning their instruments, a young man in a black kurta and rimless glasses suddenly appeared in front of the stage, clutching his sitar. He addressed the audience in beautiful Urdu. "This stage has so many gorgeous flowers. I would like to add my fragrance by joining my friends Robuda and Aluda this evening." A murmur of surprise went around the audience. The performance was meant to be a duet. Who was this? Although he spoke poetically, this man had the air of a human detonator. He held his instrument as if it were a weapon, pointing it at phantom enemies. His eyes blazed behind the glasses he wore. Some recognized him as Vilayat Hussain Khan, the son of Inayat Hussain Khan. A few people started cheering. The young man jumped onto the stage, and the other musicians made space for him. Baba Alauddin walked up to the stage and growled at all three. "Remember, you are all my children. Play with love and respect." It was a formidable stage. Ali Akbar sat in the center, looking vaguely daunted. On either side of him, sat the two sitar players, both strikingly good-looking men with large foreheads, suggesting grand destinies. Two Miraj Tanpuras at the back and two Chicago radio mics in front. It was a picture of perfect melodic symmetry. In the front row sat the undisputed heads of the music world. The men were dressed in stylish achkans or suits, the women in gorgeous Banarsi silk saris. They rustled, they coughed. The master of ceremonies introduced the musicians. Ravi Shankar made the customary gesture, asking for permission to begin. He then struck the notes of Rag Maj Khamaj. He played for a few minutes, then turned to Vilayat Khan, giving him the cue. The younger musician played the same riff, but in a more lilting style. They meandered through the alap for almost an hour, building gradually, thoughtfully, teasing the ma, the rag's dominant note, the maj in the khamaj. At some point, it became evident to the audience that a subtle musical duel was taking place. By the time the faster taan started, the notes had become sharp arrows shot with the intention to annihilate. Ali Akbar Khan hardly got to play, so after a while he quietly put his sarod down and looked bewildered. His head turned from left to right and right to left as the sharpshooters on either side battled on. At one point, Ravi Shankar hit a set of high notes in the third octave. Like a kite catching its prey, Vilayat Khan scooped up the lid of his little metal oil box and, instead of using his fingers, pressed it on the strings of his instrument. The sound that emerged of amplified metal on metal was audacious and amazing. Suddenly, Hafiz Ali Khan got up from his seat and applauded. Mar Dala! He killed him. Others sitting next to him also cheered. Baba Alauddin Khan also jumped up and started shouting, You have defamed my boy, Shoror Bocha, you son of a pig, you scoundrel, followed by even choicer expletives in Bengali. The epic concert was discussed by Delhi's music world for days afterwards. Who was this Vilayat Khan, the long-lost son of Inayat? Some weeks later, Ravi Shankar invited Vilayat Khan and Ali Akbar to the radio station to listen to his new orchestra, Vadya Vrinda. They complimented him for integrating elements of Western harmony into Indian music. Afterwards, Ravi Shankar said, Vilayat Bhai, this should never happen again. Vilayat replied, I agree, Robuda. The two musicians promised each other they would never perform together. Kishan Maharaj later told someone, if these two eyes of India play together again, one will shut forever.
It's so beautiful. I think we don't have much time, Namita, but I would.
Shall we call?
No, yeah. So
The
before
Chote Khan
I do
Sahib?
that, I just want to say that in this whole book, my friends, it's the last chapter which is just beautiful, and it's beautiful because what Namita has done is that she has described death, but in such an operatic way, where everything which was dear to Kasab, that keeps on coming as an imagery, and it's poetic. It's just beautiful, and we would like to end this session by reading that section out. But before we do that, it would be wonderful to have Hidayat on stage. Hidayat bhai, okay, he's run away.
You start.
Yeah, I'll start. I was not planning to do this, but it's too tempting. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, sure. The chapter is called Unstuck Sound, and it's almost like a cinema. Ah, bilkul. Thank you.
specs? Okay.
The mood outside Jaslok Hospital's intensive care unit is always fraught. But in those first 2 weeks of March 2004, the emotional intensity was palpable. Inside, on bed number 9, lay one of India's greatest musicians, fading in and out of consciousness. Visitors and well-wishers drifted in. Some came to say goodbye, some to get blessings. They all blended in with the movie playing in his head and with a score that would go on forever. He heard the drone of the Tanpura, the earthing in his life. He saw the grand old men and women of music float past and touch their feet one by one while humming their music. He was in Calcutta, inside a stilt house, with the Hooghly flowing just outside his window, and the boatman's song wafted high into the sky like a sweet lament. He recognized the familiar, comforting scent of his wife. He felt Shujat's lips kissing his hand. He heard Hidayat's soft voice. He heard himself say, "Look after each other." Now he was driving around Shimla, and his car floated high above the pine trees. He yearned for something, but didn't know what. He heard a voice say, "Bhaiya," and felt someone touching his feet lightly. He was running up the dark stairs of a rickety building, and he could hear the first call to prayer in Rag, Belas Khanitodi, and he saw green minarets pierce the blue sky. The scene turned into a palace in Afghanistan, and he was facing majestic snow mountains in the distance, while a long alap in Rag Darbari made everything emerald green. And then suddenly, it was Tilak Kamod in pink and white and blue, and he was laughing with dragonflies and ducks by a lake.
Rag Megh, bold and beguiling, and a dark grey sky. He was walking hand in hand with Amir Khan on Marine Drive in the rain, allowing the waves to drench them. And they saw a blurry Ravi Shankar in the distance and waved at him, laughing joyously. He heard an Urdu poem about flowers and prayer. The music changed to Chandni Kedar, and he was ballroom dancing with a beautiful silvery princess in front of the Taj Mahal, and then playing badminton with his daughters while the fountains threw up water in perfect synchronicity. He drifted into the sky and was now floating high above. He heard Rag Basant. Below, through a molten yellow haze, he could see a young boy with a small sitar sitting between a woman with big silver anklets on her feet and a man with long curly locks holding a baby on his lap. He ran across the triangular courtyard of the house into the garden at the back. He heard someone lovingly say, "Mia, one day you will be great." He saw Rag Bhairavi floating towards him in blue and gold, and he heard soft tinkling laughter. Suddenly, the scale changed. The music grew louder and more thunderously beautiful, and finally became deafening as it slowly slipped over him like an invisible comforter. Then there was silence.
This is beautiful, just beautiful. We are very fortunate that Hidayat is here with us, and he will, of course, grace us by playing a bit. But I think before that happens, I guess if you have any questions to both of them, please go ahead. I'm handing the mic to you.
I would actually like to tell something that Abba used to always tell us. He used to say that worldwide he was known as and referred as the Ustad Vilayat Khan, the maestro. But there was only one place in the world where they did not call him Ustad, but they called him Amader Bilayat. And that was Kolkata. He began his journey here, and today he rests here along with my grandfather, Ustad Vilayat Khan Sahab. So it's such a special moment for me to be here with all of you all in this historic venue, um, discussing this beautifully written book by my dear friend and Shantanu Bhai, who I've met today for the first time, but I've been a huge fan of. To share this moment with you all, it's really heartwarming and touching. Thank you all so much for being a part of this.
I guess if there are any questions.
Why was he not allowed to sing? Why did the mother said, no, you'll not sing, you'll only play? Because he used to sing very well. I've heard him also.
Yes, so I believe she said to him that you come from a family of sitar players. I come from a family of singers. I don't want anyone to ever say that I made you become, part of the matriarchal side. You have an obligation to play your sitar. And I think it kind of took him aback and really hurt him because he had started really enjoying singing and would give full concerts of singing. And along those lines, I just have to tell you a really funny story because it happened in Calcutta. So he once, because it was a private, so he promised her that he would never sing, like as in full concerts. But once there was a private concert held in somebody's home in Calcutta, a very well-known connoisseur of music. And he decided that because it was a private concert, he would do the entire concert singing. And he played like really khas rags, and he played one after another, and it was just amazing because he was really an accomplished singer, and this was a rare treat. And the person whose home it was asked him if he could record it, and he said, sure. And a few days later, he asked the person for the tape so that he could listen to his own singing. And the person obviously sent it across. And, a few months later, that host said that, "Khan sahib, wo tape?" And he looked at him and he said, "Which tape?"
No, because at Dover Lane, I've heard him singing and then playing.
So he would do that beach mein, I think. Hai na? So. Haan ji.
With Hidayat's permission, I'd like to recount a story which you may not have told her for her book, but Ustadji confirmed it. See, you talked about Lyle Wachowski going after Ustadji, but long before that, there was a contract with Gramophone Company to record Rag Darbari Kannada, the days of good old long-playing records. But Ustadji was up in Shimla, and he liked the environment so much he wasn't going to come down for the recording. So this may be the one and only time that the Gramophone Company packed up their entire recording equipment, went out, and on the palace veranda, I don't know how they managed to get all the sounds out, but they recorded Rag Darbari Kannada. Any of you who have that original recording, you're holding on to a piece not recorded in the studios, but recorded.
I also didn't know that story, actually.
That's an amazing story.
Remember, I asked him that question on the EBC interview, and he said, "Oh, this is someone who knows my secrets." I said, "No." Then I identified myself.
Through this journey of this book, I've actually learned so much about my own father that I didn't know. And through stories like this, that he's had so much connections with so many people from the past, that I've really gotten to know so many unbelievable stories, and it's been such an amazing experience. So thank you for sharing that story.
And I just want to add something to what you said, Hidayat, is that this book is also very depressing for musicians like me. Because you realize that we are completely spineless. We have no point of view. हमको कोई भी काम देता हम कर लेते हैं. This guy is refusing Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Bharat Ratna at that age. Because why?
Said no to Nehru at one point.
Yeah. Because why? Who are they to judge me? This point of view is missing today. Unbelievable.
हमारी अभी यही conversation हो रही थी पीछे कि when you have reached a certain stature in your life, to say no to something is much easier. But when you're a struggling artist in your late 30s, early 40s, and you're being offered a Padma Shri or something like that, at that point of your life to say no, that requires a whole nother set of
Hi, yeah, I'm not going to get up because I might obstruct the view of those sitting behind me. Namita, this is for you, please. Compliments on a marvelously written book. I've read Music Room as well, and so beautifully researched too. My question is that in your research, a lot of the replies that you may have received from people who you spoke to may have come in Urdu and Hindi and maybe even Bengali, and the language of this book is really music. How did you therefore deliver it all in English?
So, you know, music is also another language. And I think that this book is already a book in translation because I'm translating music into an alien language to make it accessible to a world that may not have otherwise listened or understood that language. And so, हिंदी एंड उर्दू उसके बाद अगर म्यूज़िक को इंग्लिश में लिख के समझाएं लोगों को तो उसमें क्या बड़ी बात है बंगाली हिंदी उर्दू एंड आई हैड फ्रेंड्स हु वुड कीप you know helping me with translations especially the Bengali bits so that's to answer your
Thanks.
One last question, let's hear the master play.
Mohammed bhai
So the question is for Hidayat bhai. You approached Namita to ask her to write the book.
That's a very understatement, actually.
Yeah, okay. And and from what I understand, she told you that she would write the book as long as she had complete freedom. So after the book was written, what was your experience? Like, were you shocked by what she had researched, what she had found out about your father? And there's a lot of unsavory things. You know, which one can say that about Khan Sahib? But, you know, his life was like a human being's, very complex, and, you know, with the complexity goes the human nature. So you as his son and as his student as well, what were your feelings about some of the things that came out of the book?
just one quick question one quick point let's not use the word unsavory let's just start accepting human beings with all their complexities in a way that is non-judgmental and I think that was an underlying tone in this book and it just gets amplified when it comes to a famous person or a musician but each and every one of us have these different sides to us and it's really beautiful if we just learn to understand and accept them with compassion.
No,
Absolutely.
that's a good point, and I apologize for using that. Yeah.
No, so one of the things that I'm going to say something a little controversial over here. A lot of the great maestros of Indian classical music and the world of Indian classical music makes them holier than thou. They make them almost not human beings. My father made sure that regardless of, we'd go to people's homes where they would put his picture in their temples and along with the other gods and do puja to him. And he would very gracefully accept that and he would come out and he would say that that's their reverence, but you should never forget that I'm just a human being. So saying that, he was a human and humans are what we are. He was a real person. When he would walk into the room, we would not have to just stand up and be on attention, on guard. He would have conversations with us which were very real. He would joke with us, he would talk to us. And his belief was that music is inspired by life. So if you're not real with the music, with your life, then your music will never reflect that. Namita and I have known each other for a very long time, but when I always had a dream of wanting to write a book on my father's, and it wasn't a dream about writing a book on his music, because who is going to write a book about his music? I mean, really. But I wanted to, more importantly, I wanted to write a book about him as a human being. And I had this faith in Namita that she's, one thing about her, she's a very dear friend of mine, but she's a very straight arrow and a straightforward person. And she is what she is. And that faith in her made me sort of hone down, and really I chased after her. I said, you know what, you have to write this book. You have to write this book, not about the Ustad, but rather about the man. And it took me about, 6-8 months or a year of sort of pestering her and saying, Nams, do it, do it, do it. And finally she decided to do it. And I actually haven't even read the final copy yet. I read like something which is about 3 edits back. And even that was so real. And I learned so much about the book, about the man. And whatever is written in the book is honest. And it's very real. And to me, it was very inspiring. And I could not be happier with the outcome of it. So thank you so much. Really.
Hidayat, I just want to say that don't read the final draft. This is your father's ideology कि सब कुछ समझने की जरूरत नहीं है, कुछ ना समझ भी छोड़ दीजिए.
क्या बात.
I think that'll be beautiful.
क्या बात. वाह.
I think we should now take your leave the stage to Hidayat and let him play a bit and entertain this. You've been such a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Shantanu. Thank you.
अकॉस्टिक वाले माइक पे थोड़ा सा रिवर्ब दीजिएगा। थोड़ा सा और। Very good. वोकल देख लीजिए।
Oh, sure. Just check your mic, please. Vocal mic.
Is it on?
Yeah, that's it.
Pani sa re ga re pa pa ma ga sa ni sa. Are you all happy with the sound? Very good. Thank you, bhai. Gama padama sani dama paga gare gama pagama gare sasani pani sagare papa ma gasani sa chet mas chet mas bole
जिया राम हमरे अगनवा चैतमस जिया मोरा है।
Thank you all so much. You've been a wonderful audience. And as I was saying earlier, that this is the only place in the world where they referred to Ustad Vilayat Khan as Amadir Bilayat. So it means a lot to me to come to this historical venue in the Mecca of Indian classical music, to get an opportunity to perform for all of you all and launch this book that means so much to me. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey for me personally. On behalf of my brother over here, and myself, thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have you here with us. While the stage setup is changed, it is time for me to announce a short 10-minute presentation, which is very, very dear to Kolkata. Red FM Shortcuts with RJ Praveen. Bade Wale Chote Kisse. RJ Praveen is a familiar voice and name for all of us. He is Limca Book of Records holder, Golden Mic RJ of the Year 2016, and RJ of the Year by ACEF in 2017. He has been awarded at the New York Radio Festival for Best Innovation and Best Narration. And of course, he is the morning host of the show Morning Number 1 on 93.5 Red FM. If I may please call Praveen up. Or Praveen, if you can give us 2 minutes while we clear? Yeah,